All 32 NFL teams have the same goal entering each and every year, and that is of course to win the Super Bowl. And despite how good the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles were by season's end, they had a lot of questions entering the year. Was Nick Sirianni the long-term head coach? How would they rebound after collapsing the way they did in 2023? How would they replace a Hall of Fame center in Jason Kelce? And the list goes on. And the reason we bring the Eagles up is because no team is perfect and every single team has questions entering 2025. And in today's video, we're going to discuss 4 of the biggest questions entering this year. This isn't going to be as simple as will the Philadelphia Eagles repeat or are the Kansas City Chiefs done? No, these are going to be questions that teams will have to answer all throughout the 2025 season, and in some cases even beyond the 25 season. We will discuss several honorable mentions at the end, and there's a lot to break down in today's video, and if you could like the video before we get started, I'd really appreciate it, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by talking about the Dallas Cowboys and how they will respond after a down 2024 season. Teams are going to have down years, and it happens, and 2024 was a down year for Dallas after being the only team between 2021 and 2023 to have 12 wins in each year. No other team accomplished that during this stretch, not the Chiefs, not the Bills, anybody. But as we know with the Dallas Cowboys, they haven't been to the NFC Championship game since the 1990s, and unfortunately for Dallas, they saw an NFC Championship game in 2024 that was pretty much their worst nightmare. The Eagles had one of the best teams of all time, and the Commanders went to a round in the playoffs with a rookie quarterback that Dak Prescott hasn't been able to lead this team to, despite being in the NFL for nearly a decade. The Commanders' defense obviously played a big part within this too, as in the divisional round against the Lions, they forced 5 turnovers and won on the road despite being near double-digit underdogs. And the worst part for Dallas was this was with their former defensive coordinator as the team's head coach. Given who the Dallas Cowboys are in the media and from a societal standpoint, there's always going to be a lot of pressure on this team to win, period. But the Cowboys are in a tough situation entering 2025 because of how good the Eagles roster is, along with the season the Commanders just had. Not only that, but they gave Dak Prescott a near $250 million contract, and the reality is Dak underperformed in 2024. Now, I think there is a wider range of how people feel about Dak Prescott than most other quarterbacks, but he finished second in MVP voting in 2023 and has 2 35-plus passing touchdown seasons in the last 4 years. I think he is a good quarterback that receives a lot of criticism, which again comes with being a Dallas Cowboys quarterback, especially with how he played in the 2023 wildcard round. But the point is he did not play well in 2024 in the 8 games he played, and not only that, the Cowboys also had a future Hall of Famer retire along the offensive line this offseason in Zach Martin, and as much as I like the idea of Tyler Booker in this offense, it's not going to be a snap of a finger replacement. I wasn't particularly impressed by left tackle Tyler Guyton in his rookie year, and I'm hoping he takes a big step in 2025, but there's a lot of pressure for this offensive line to perform too. I will be the first to say I love the George Pickens trade for Dallas and hope they work out a long-term deal for him to stay in Dallas, but I can't help but think how limited this team is going to be in 2025 due to the run game. Rico Dowdle had over 1,000 yards rushing for Dallas last year, but the second leading rusher was Ezekiel Elliott, who had just 226 rushing yards and averaged 3.1 yards per carry. This team finished 30th in yards per attempt and 27th in rushing yards last year, and it was because they could not consistently run the football. And while I like the addition of George Pickens and especially the idea of pairing him with CeeDee Lamb, I can't say I can get behind a running back room led by Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders in 2025. I personally do think Dak Prescott will bounce back this year, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he has another 4,400 plus passing yard, 35 plus passing touchdown season, but I think this team's ceiling is very limited heading into the year, largely due to their own decisions. As it was proven last year, the best thing you can do when the playoffs roll around is to be able to consistently pound the rock and simply not turn the football over. I know football can be very complex with play calls and teams can have 300 plus page playbooks or 12-word play calls, but there's times where it's as simple as running inside zone or power right at a defense and saying stop us. And with a young offensive line and a lack of run game, I really worry about how the Cowboys will answer the critics in 2025. Now, we obviously know that Dak Prescott is the Cowboys franchise quarterback and will be for the next couple of years, especially with the financial commitment they have to him, but what we do not know is if Kyler Murray is going to be the Cardinals' long-term quarterback, meaning after the 2025 season. His play at times can be really frustrating because there's times like the Rams game or like the 49ers game in Week 18 where he will play like an MVP quarterback. He'll play like a top 3, top 4, top 5, top 6 quarterback in the NFL, and then he'll go through 8 or 10 or 14 games where he plays like a middle of the pack guy, and I'm not talking 10 to 12 either. I'm talking a 16 to 20 ranking where he is nowhere close to the player that he can be for 60 minutes at a time, and that's really frustrating when you want to build your franchise the way Jonathan Gannon and the way general manager Monty Ossenfort are building their team. For reference, Kyler Murray had a phenomenal game in Week 2 against the Rams this past year, and we broke this down in a Cardinals video we did a couple of weeks ago. I recommend going to check that out, but in the ensuing 14 games between the Week 2 Rams game and the Week 18 game against the 49ers, Kyler had just 13 passing touchdowns to 11 interceptions, and that is not going to cut it. Now, I think two things can be true. I don't think Kyler is that good of a quarterback consistently to be the Cardinals franchise quarterback for the next couple of years, but I also don't think Drew Petzing is a good play caller either. I think some people legitimately want to make this out to be like it's a black and white thing, and that it's specifically Drew Petzing's fault or that it's specifically Kyler Murray's fault, and very rarely in football is it ever one individual's fault. I think a clear anomaly would be the Browns with Deshaun Watson, with how many first-round picks they gave him versus the production they received from him, along with the contract they gave him, but again, that's a very rare anomaly, and this is not an anomaly in Arizona where it's both on Drew Petzing and Kyler Murray. There's 2 games last year in particular from Kyler that really frustrated me, and one was against the Vikings, in which it was 3rd and 7 early in the 4th quarter. Arizona was leading by 6 points, and Kyler throws an absolute duck to his former teammate Byron Murphy, and Minnesota got the ball back around the 32-yard line. You really can't justify that and say that that's an arm punt because Minnesota got the ball back with such good field position, and he pretty much threw it up and just said, hey, somebody's down there somewhere, and the same thing happened late in the 4th quarter against Carolina in a game that Arizona should have won. But the point is, Kyler Murray's future in the desert is uncertain, and right now he has a cap hit of $53.2 million in 2026, and if they trade him pre-June 1st, Arizona only has a dead cap hit of $17.9 million, meaning they would save roughly $35.3 million to trade him pre-June 1st. Now, I don't want to get into the conversation of who would trade for him and what they would give up, but Kyler Murray would be a player that teams would trade for. Obviously, you can eliminate a lot of teams fairly quickly, like the Baltimores, Buffaloes, Kansas Cities, Cincinnati's, and Philadelphia's of the world, but the point is, somebody who needs a quarterback with GMs or head coaches' jobs on the line would absolutely trade for Kyler Murray, and I really think that Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort have done a tremendous job of building this roster up since they took over in 2023. Whether it was drafting Paris Johnson and B.J. Ojulari in their first draft, or any of the 8 selections they had in the top 104 in 2024, or even Walter Nolan and Will Johnson in 2025, I really like what this team has done, and even by signing a guy like Josh Sweat in free agency too. If they want to go get any of Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller, or Lenora Sellers in the 2026 draft, this would be the team to trade a 2026 first and a 2027 first so that they could go get their quarterback of the future and have him on a discount for the next few years, and that's largely why I think Kyler Murray is kind of in a now or never year in 2025, despite not necessarily being in a contract year. Now, to the AFC we go to discuss 2 class of 2018 quarterbacks who have had tremendous careers since being drafted in Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. As we know, the easiest way to build a roster in the salary cap era of the NFL is to hit on draft picks, and to continue to hit on draft picks, both of which Baltimore and Buffalo do. But the question here for the Ravens is, can they finally get over the hump? Can they get to the Super Bowl? And we'll discuss Buffalo in a minute, but when you look at the Ravens roster, I think this is going to be the final year where they have everyone, meaning the vets of the roster, still playing at a high level and still be worth what they're getting paid. Derrick Henry obviously had a great year for Baltimore last year as he ran for 1,900 yards and 16 touchdowns in his first year with the team. But he is 31 years old, and given that he plays running back, we are a lot closer to the end of his career than the start. Then you look at guys like Marlon Humphrey, who will play this season at 29, and I know Marlon had a great year last year, and I've been a fan of Marlon for a long time, but with him at 29, Derrick Henry at 31, Ronnie Stanley at 31, Mark Andrews at 30, Kyle Van Van Noy at 34, and Odafe Owe entering a contract year as an edge rusher, and Ravens fans certainly understand the reference and the significance of that. I really think this is the final year they run it with this group of guys, and this is all right before Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum get paid. Now, to say this is Lamar Jackson's final shot at a Super Bowl at 28 years old would be ridiculous, and I am certainly not saying that, but 15 in red or 17 in blue has stopped you a handful of times in this era, and I think we're at a point with Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City where I don't want to say they're cruising through the regular season or not placing an importance on the regular season games, because that's certainly not the case, but I think we are at a point where these teams get to January and wait to see how the seeding plays out and where they're going to get matched up with one another, because we know now there's a very good chance the AFC Championship game will feature any two of the Chiefs, Bills, or Ravens, and unfortunately for the Bills and Ravens, their rosters and teams have been loaded over the past few years, but they play at the same time as a team that's been to the Super Bowl in 5 of the past 6 years, and the question entering 2025 for the Bills is the exact same thing, and it's, can you get over the hump? Can you overcome the fact that you are 0-4 against the Chiefs in this era in the playoffs? Whether you play them in the AFC Divisional Round or the AFC Championship game and you're in a position to win in the fourth quarter, can you finally beat the Chiefs, or are they going to win again? Now, I do want to credit Buffalo for even getting to the AFC Championship game last year, because 2024 was a transition year for them as they moved on from the Micah Hydes, the Jordan Poyers, the Stephon Diggs, and the Tre'Davious Whites of the world to get to the roster to where they are today. And I personally think Buffalo overachieved last year, especially with the talent they had on the roster. Now, unfortunately, the media isn't going to bring that up, nor is the media going to bring up that the Bills scored 29 points in a road playoff game, which should be enough to win, but unfortunately it's not. Nobody would have thought in the late 80s that Dan Marino would have won his entire career without a Super Bowl win, especially after throwing for 5,000 yards and 48 touchdowns at just 23 years old in 1984, which obviously was a completely different era and game entirely back then. Now, I do think Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson will eventually get to a Super Bowl, but those types of conversations are starting to be had about each player, especially considering that both are approaching 30, and fair or not, that's never a position you want to be in as an NFL franchise. The next big question we have entering the 2025 season goes to Nashville to ask the Tennessee Titans, do you have enough? Because this is a team that finished 3-14 last year and finished bottom 5 in both points per game and points allowed per game, and my biggest fear is that they have a head coach who is kind of already on the hot seat despite what the media may say, and that he's safe and that he's going to last the 2025 season, and that Cam Ward's going to have a new coach, new offensive coordinator, new everything entering his second season, which creates a lot of uncertainty. Now, not every head coach is going to be a Ben Johnson type candidate where they're a legit offensive mind that not just one but multiple teams want, and the jury is still out on Ben Johnson for that matter. We don't know if he's going to be a good head coach in the NFL or not, but my point is the receiving core of Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, Treylon Burks, Chamari DK, Alec Iomanner, and Van Jefferson going to be enough for Cam Ward to succeed this year? I have a lot of questions around the Titans entering 2025, and my biggest question was giving Dan Moore a 4-year, $80+ million contract. Now, I do want to say that unfortunately I have watched a lot more Nicholas Petit-Frere tape over the past couple of years than I would have liked, but I don't necessarily think the reaction to that is to give Dan Moore, who is not much of an upgrade from NPF, a $20 million per year deal. Now, I know they can get out of it really after 2 years, but I thought that was an extreme overpay and also an extreme overreaction from NPF, as I think there were several offensive tackles that you could have gotten cheaper than giving Dan Moore an $80 million contract, but I really worry about the offensive weaponry for Cam Ward in his rookie year. Now, I know they drafted tight end Gunnar Helm from Texas, who I liked a lot as a draft prospect, and they also drafted Stanford wide receiver Alec Iomanner, another player that I really liked in the draft process. But while I like those guys, I don't necessarily think that Iomanner is going to be the definitive wide receiver one, and that Gunnar Helm's going to be a future Pro Bowl tight end. Liking guys in the draft process does not automatically equate to them being quality starters for the next couple of years, as much as I would like that for Cam Ward, Alec Iomanner, and Gunnar Helm themselves, as well as the Titans fan base. So this all goes back full circle to ask the owner, Amy Adams Strunk, who I think has been very fire happy over the past couple of years, is this roster going to be enough for Brian Callahan and his coaching staff to survive 2025 and beyond so that they can legitimately lead this franchise for the next several years? I think the question we just asked the Tennessee Titans also applies to the New England Patriots, and it's, did they do enough for Drake May this offseason, which ultimately I think they did. Whether it was drafting Travion Henderson, Kyle Williams, or bringing in Stephon Diggs in free agency, or even upgrading the offensive line the way they did by drafting Will Campbell, or by bringing in Garrett Bradbury in free agency, they definitely helped out Drake May in a big way compared to what he had during his rookie season. Another question I have is, how good is Jordan Love going to be in the long run? He had a really good 2023 season, and of course the Packers dominated the Cowboys in the wildcard round of the 2023 playoffs, and there was a point during the 49ers game of that year that I thought they were going to go to the NFC Championship game in Jordan Love's first year starting. As we know now, they didn't, and in 2024, unfortunately, Jordan Love was hurt in the opener against the Eagles down in Brazil, and I really wonder how much that impacted the rest of his season. And what's always going to be tough for Jordan Love is following both Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Favre was a 3-time league MVP, and Rodgers was, of course, a 4-time league MVP. And having to constantly hear those comparisons about, hey, you're good, but you're not as good as the other guys, or hey, you may be a franchise quarterback for the next 10 years, but you're not Brett or Aaron. That takes a toll on a guy after a while, and for reference, I know a lot of my viewers do not remember Brett Favre during his Packers career, but he was a 3-time consecutive league MVP from 95 to 97, and took the Packers to 2 Super Bowls, winning one over the Patriots in 96. I would imagine a lot of us remember Rodgers' career with the Packers, and he was a 4-time league MVP and one of the most dominant players ever at the position. So having to follow those guys in a lot of ways sets Jordan up for not necessarily failure, but in some ways disappointment, because you are having to follow 2 of the best quarterbacks, not just in Packers franchise history, but in NFL history. And to be completely honest, I don't envy the position Jordan Love is in. But that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as we are closing in on 200,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.